You know, when you've spent years perfecting the art of catching fleeting moments on camera raw emotions, stolen glances you think you've seen it all. I thought I had anyway until that day. The day Liam, a freelance photographer known for making other people's happiness timeless, saw my own world fracture through a camera lens. It started innocently enough. I'd been hired for what seemed like the gig of a lifetime high-paying private event with minimal details shared in advance. It was held at this sprawling, estate-like venue that practically screamed exclusivity. The kind of place where the wine flows like water and everyone acts like they're starring in their own soap opera. But hey, the money was too good to question. I spent hours snapping away. The job was straightforward. Candid shots of guests mingling, laughing, and enjoying the night. By the end, my memory cards were packed, and I was exhausted but satisfied. Or so I thought. Back in my studio the next day, I sat down to review the photos. Editing is usually my therapy. I zone out, adjusting light and color until each frame glows. But this time, I couldn't even make it past the first batch. There she was, Mia, my wife, in the background of one shot, leaning in close to a man I didn't recognize, her hand lightly grazing his chest as she smiled in a way that wasn't meant for me. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a candid moment caught at the wrong time. I went through every photo meticulously, frame by frame, until the denial dissolved into cold, hard reality. One sequence of shots told a story that words couldn't undo. The laughter, the closeness, the way they disappeared together into the edge of the frame. I felt like I was suffocating. My chest tightened as my mind raced, replaying every interaction, every unexplained late night, every time she said, "It's just work stuff, Liam." But the photo didn't lie, and neither did the reflection in the window behind the faint but clear image of the venue's distinctive wrought iron gates. That's when I knew I had to dig deeper. I couldn't let it go. The image of Mia with that man had gnawed at me, clawing at my sanity. I told myself I needed answers, and the reflection of those wrought iron gates was my breadcrumb. The next morning, I called the event organizer under the guise of being an event planner. "Hi, this is Liam from Opus Events," I said, masking the tremor in my voice. "I'm scouting venues for an upcoming shoot and wanted to follow up on the estate from your recent event." A bit of charm and a fabricated client list was all it took. Within minutes, I had the name and address of the estate. The place was even grander in person, a secluded mansion surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens. The kind of place where you feel like breathing too hard might violate some unspoken rule. I made my way inside, pretending to inquire about event packages. The staff were polite but cautious, a little too polished. It didn't take long to figure out why. During the tour, I casually mentioned how a friend of mine had attended a recent event and couldn't stop talking about the venue. I even described the man I'd seen in the photos. The host smiled tightly. "That would be Mr. Alistair Dorne, the estate's owner," she said, her voice dripping with reverence. Alistair Dorne. The name was unfamiliar, but the unease in the staff's tone was not. People like him, wealthy, charming, and untouchable, they always left a trail of whispers. As I pressed for more details, the host became visibly uncomfortable. She finally admitted he had a history of involving himself personally with some of the guests, but quickly brushed it off as if it were none of my concern. It wasn't much, but it was enough to confirm what I feared. Mia hadn't stumbled into this by accident. Dorne had lured her in, the same way he'd probably done with countless others. I left the estate with my heart pounding, every muscle in my body screaming to confront her. But when I got home, I froze. She was there, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if the ground hadn't just cracked open beneath us. I couldn't come at her swinging. I needed answers. So I waited until later that evening, when the house was quiet and the air felt heavy. "Mia," I said, holding up the photo on my tablet. "Who is this?" She didn't flinch, didn't stutter. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "It's not what you think." That was the moment I realized how much worse this was going to get. Her calmness was what unnerved me the most. I wanted her to panic, to stammer out a pathetic excuse that I could tear apart. Instead, she sat there composed, as if this was just another night. "Mia," I pressed, my voice trembling. "Don't lie to me. I saw the photos. I went to the estate. I know who he is." For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something flicker in her eyes, fear, maybe even shame. But then it was gone, replaced by an icy resolve. "It's not what you think," she repeated. "Alistair, he's not just some guy. He's dangerous." Dangerous? The word sent a chill down my spine. Dangerous how? I demanded. "What the hell are you talking about?" Mia leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. She took a deep breath, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "He's been blackmailing me, Liam, for months." My mind reeled. Blackmail? What could Mia possibly have done to put herself in this position? I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but I forced myself to stay calm. "What does he have on you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw her truly vulnerable. "A mistake," she said quietly. "A stupid, impulsive mistake I made years ago, before we even met. I thought it was behind me, but somehow he found out. If this gets out, Liam..." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. "It could ruin us. It could ruin you." Ruin me? What could she have done that would spill over into my life? I pressed her for details, but she clammed up, shaking her head as if even saying it out loud would make it worse. "That doesn't explain why you were like that with him," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She flinched, then looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "I didn't have a choice. He's sick, Liam. He plays these games, gets off on control. If I didn't play along, he threatened to expose everything." I wanted to believe her, but my anger was louder than her explanation. "So you just went along with it? Let him treat you like some pawn in his twisted games." The words came out harsher than I intended, but I couldn't stop them. Mia stood up, her hands balled into fists. "You think I wanted this? You think I enjoyed any of it?" she shouted. "You don't know what it's like to feel trapped, Liam, to have no way out." Her words echoed through the room, and for the first time, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her we'd figure this out together. But another part of me, an uglier, angrier part, wanted to walk out the door and never come back. Instead, I sat there in silence as she broke down in front of me. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about her infidelity or even the blackmail. This was about power, his power over her, and the way it was tearing us both apart. I didn't sleep that night. While Mia cried herself to sleep in the other room, I stared at the photo on my screen, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do. I woke up the next morning with a single thought. I couldn't let this go. Whatever Mia had gotten herself into, whatever Alistair Dorne had over her, it was eating her alive, and it was starting to devour me too. If I didn't get to the bottom of this, it would consume us both. The first step was finding out what Dorne had on her. Mia wasn't talking, and pushing her any further felt like trying to squeeze water from a stone. So I started digging. If there was one thing I'd learned from years of freelance photography, it was how to track things and people. Dorne wasn't hard to find online. His wealth wasn't just a rumor. It was plastered across magazine articles and glossy social media posts. CEO of some high-end real estate firm, board member of several charities, and a regular on the elite party circuit. But beneath the surface, things got murky. Whispers of lawsuits settled quietly, connections to unsavory figures, and a reputation for excess that no amount of PR spin could fully hide. The more I read, the more a pattern emerged. Dorne had a history of targeting women intelligent, ambitious women who had something to lose. He'd lure them in, gain their trust, and then exploit their vulnerabilities for his own amusement. There were rumors of blackmail, but nothing concrete. The kind of things people talked about in hushed tones, but no one dared bring to light. I needed more than rumors, though. I needed proof. I started with the photos I'd taken at the event, zooming in on reflections, cropping and enhancing backgrounds, and cross-referencing faces with social media profiles. It was tedious, but eventually I hit gold. One of the other guests, a sharply dressed man I'd barely noticed at the time, had been tagged in a photo at the same event. His profile was public, and it didn't take long to find another connection. A woman who'd posted about her own difficult experience with Dorne. I reached out to her anonymously, posing as a journalist researching powerful men who abuse their positions. To my surprise, she replied. Her story was eerily similar to Mia's mistake from her past that Dorne had dug up and used as leverage. He'd made her attend his parties, pretend to be his date, and play along with his twisted games. When she finally refused, he destroyed her reputation with a single phone call. "Be careful," she wrote in her last message. "He's untouchable. People like him always are." Her warning didn't scare me. If anything, it made me more determined. I wasn't about to let this man ruin Mia or me without a fight. That night, I confronted Mia again. "I know about Dorne's pattern," I said, showing her the messages I'd received. "You're not the first woman he's done this to, but we need to know what he's holding over you. If we're going to fight this, we have to be honest with each other." She stared at me for what felt like an eternity, her face a mix of fear and exhaustion. Finally, she whispered, "It's not just about me, Liam. It's about you too." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then pulled out a folder from her bag and handed it to me. Inside were photos of me, taken without my knowledge. They showed me meeting with a former client, one who'd been embroiled in some shady dealings a year ago. Dorne had twisted it into something incriminating, something that could ruin my career. "I didn't tell you because I was trying to protect you," Mia said, her voice breaking. "He's not just targeting me. He's targeting us." I sat there in stunned silence, staring at the evidence of my own entrapment. This wasn't just about Mia's past or Dorne's sick games. This was war. After seeing those photos, my world tilted on its axis. I thought this was about Mia's mistakes, her choices, but now Dorne had roped me into his web. The photos of me weren't damning on their own, but the way they were framed, the angles, the timing, they were designed to tell a story that could bury me if I didn't act. I sat there with the folder in my hands, my heart pounding, while Mia watched me like I might shatter at any moment. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Her eyes welled with tears. "Because I knew you want to fight him, and fighting him is dangerous. He has power, Liam. Real power. People like him don't lose." "Then why the hell should we just roll over?" I shot back, anger finally breaking through the shock. "He's already in our lives, already threatening us. The least we can do is take away his control." Mia shook her head. "You don't understand. He has connections, judges, police, politicians, people who owe him favors. If we go after him, we're not just risking a scandal. We're risking everything." Her words rattled me, but they didn't stop me. I couldn't just sit there and let this man twist our lives into knots while we cowered in fear. If we don't fight, he wins. And I'm not giving him that satisfaction. I said, my voice steady now. I spent the next few days digging deeper into Dorne's life. Every article, every rumor, every trace of his business dealings became a piece of a puzzle I was determined to solve. It was slow going, but eventually, I found a cracking accountant who'd been fired from Dorne's firm years ago after a dispute. The man had posted cryptic comments online about shady financial practices, but nothing substantial. I tracked him down, convincing him to meet me at a bar under the guise of a potential freelance opportunity. When we finally sat down, I could see the weariness in his face, the weariness of someone who'd been burned before. "Why are you really here?" he asked after I'd danced around the subject for a while. "I need to know what you know about Alistair Dorne," I said plainly. "Anything that could help me expose him." His eyes narrowed, and he leaned back in his chair. "Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you're asking for?" "I don't care about the trouble," I said. "I care about stopping him." The man hesitated, then sighed. "Dorne's not just blackmailing women. He's laundering money through his events. That's why they're so exclusive, because they're cover-ups for his real business. Drugs, illegal trade, you name it." My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a predator with too much power. This was something far bigger and far darker than I'd imagined. "Why hasn't anyone come forward?" I asked. "Because anyone who does disappears," the man said flatly. "And if you're smart, you'll drop this." But I couldn't drop it. Not now. Not when I had a lead. That night, I went back to Mia and told her everything I'd learned. She looked at me with a mix of disbelief and fear. "You can't be serious," she said. "If he finds out, Dash." "He won't," I interrupted. "Not until I have enough to take him down." "And how do you plan to do that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He has the system on his side, Liam. You don't." I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stop until I found a way to tear Dorne's empire down, piece by piece. Every move I made felt like walking a razor's edge. Alistair Dorne wasn't just a man. He was a fortress, protected by layers of money, power, and silence. And here I was, a freelance photographer with nothing but a camera and a searing sense of justice, trying to bring it all crashing down. Istortet smol? If his events were fronts for laundering money and his parties were stages for his manipulation, then the truth had to be in the details. I went through every photo I'd taken at the event, looking for anything that seemed out of place, familiar faces, suspicious exchanges, or anything that screamed, "This is bigger than it looks." One photo stood out, a man handing a slim envelope to Dorne in a corner of the room, partially obscured by shadows. At first glance, it looked like nothing, but a closer inspection revealed the man's expression tense, almost fearful. I didn't recognize him, but I had a lead. The reflection in the polished marble behind him showed the emblem of a company I'd seen before in one of Dorne's PR articles. I spent days piecing things together, cross-referencing the company's name, its employees, and anyone connected to it. Finally, I found him Jonas Richter, a mid-level exec who'd suddenly resigned a month after the event. Publicly, it looked like a standard career move, but whispers in industry forums suggested otherwise. Reaching out to Richter was like navigating a minefield. I didn't know how deep his ties to Dorne went or how much danger he was willing to face. But when I called him, posing as an investigative journalist working on a story about Dorne's empire, he agreed to meet, albeit reluctantly. We met in a dingy cafe on the outskirts of town. Richter looked like a man haunted by something he couldn't escape. "I shouldn't be here," he muttered as he sat down, glancing nervously around the room. "I'm not here to expose you," I assured him. "I just need to know what Dorne has on you, what he's doing." Richter hesitated, rubbing his temples. "You don't understand," he said. "Dorne doesn't just blackmail people, he destroys them. He finds your weakness, exploits it, and when he's done, he leaves you with nothing. What did he use against you? I asked softly. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. I was laundering money for him. I didn't know at first, but when I found out, he made sure I couldn't back out. He had photos, videos, things that could ruin my life if they ever got out. Why leave then? I pressed. Because I couldn't take it anymore, he said, his voice cracking. But I'm not safe. None of us are. None of us. The words sent a chill down my spine. If Dorne had this much control over so many people, what chance did I have of exposing him? Before Richter left, he gave me one final piece of information, a name. Michael Vance, he said. He used to be Dorne's right-hand man. If anyone knows how to take him down, it's Vance. The problem? Vance had disappeared 2 years ago, reportedly fleeing the country after embezzling from Dorne's company. If I was going to find him, I'd have to dig deeper than I ever had before. When I got home that night, Mia was waiting for me. "Where have you been?" she asked, her tone a mix of worry and frustration. "I'm getting closer," I said, setting my bag down. "I met someone who can help us." Her expression softened, but only slightly. "And what happens when Dorne finds out? When he comes after us?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that I couldn't stop now, not when I was so close to the truth. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized that this wasn't just about exposing Dorne anymore. It was about reclaiming control over my life, my marriage, and everything this man had tried to take from us. But the deeper I went, the darker the path became, and I was starting to wonder if I'd make it out unscathed. Finding Michael Vance felt like chasing a ghost. His trail was cold, buried under layers of misinformation and deliberate obfuscation. But with every lead, every piece of his fragmented story, I began to see the bigger picture. Vance wasn't just a former ally of Dorne, he was a man who tried to escape the monster he'd helped create. It took weeks of late nights, cryptic messages to contacts I barely knew, and a few carefully placed bribes, but I finally found him. Vance was living in a small coastal town in Mexico under an assumed name, far from the world of money and power he'd once been a part of. Convincing him to talk wasn't easy. He'd buried this life for a reason. "Why should I trust you?" he asked when I finally met him in a dusty cafe by the water. He looked older than his years, his eyes sunken and wary. "Because I'm not here for you," I said, meeting his gaze. "I'm here to stop Dorne." That made him laugh, a dry, bitter sound. "You think you can stop him? Dorne doesn't fall. He devours everything in his path." "Not this time," I said, leaning in. "I have evidence. I just need the final piece." Vance sighed, shaking his head. "You don't know what you're asking for. Dorne isn't just a man, he's a machine. Even if you take him down, others will rise to take his place." "I don't care about the others," I said. "I care about him." For a long moment, Vance didn't respond. Then he pulled a battered USB drive from his pocket and slid it across the table. "This is everything I have. Names, dates, accounts. But be careful, it's not just Dorne you'll be going after. It's the whole damn network." I took the drive, my hands shaking. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because someone needs to," he said simply. "And I don't have the strength anymore." Back home, I plugged the drive into my computer, and the depth of Dorne's operation unfolded before me. Offshore accounts, shell companies, and connections to some of the most powerful people in the country. This wasn't just about blackmail or money laundering. This was an empire built on exploitation and fear. Mia stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder as I scrolled through the files. "Liam," she whispered, her voice trembling, "what are we going to do?" "We're going to expose him, I said, my resolve hardening. All of it. We reached out to a journalist I trusted, someone who'd covered high-profile corruption cases before and knew how to handle sensitive information. The days that followed were a blur of interviews, document verifications, and covert meetings. Every step felt like walking a tightrope, knowing that one wrong move could bring Dorne's wrath down on us. When the story finally broke, it hit like a bomb. Headlines screamed about Dorne's crimes, his empire collapsing under the weight of public outrage and legal scrutiny. His network of enablers began to unravel, their dirty secrets spilling into the light. But it wasn't without cost. Mia and I became targets of threats and harassment, our lives upended by the fallout. Through it all, we clung to each other, rediscovering a strength we'd thought we'd lost. One night, as we sat on the couch surrounded by the wreckage of our old life, Mia turned to me. Do you think we'll ever be normal again? I took her hand, squeezing it gently. I don't know, but I know we're free. In the end, Alistair Dorne went down, but the scars he left on our lives remain. I'll never forget what it felt like to see my wife in that photo, or the journey we took to reclaim what he tried to take from us. But through the pain and chaos, we found something deeper, a truth about who we are and what we're capable of. And in the quiet moments when the dust settles and the world feels still, I remember, sometimes the only way to rebuild is to let the lies burn away.